hid his offshore company in France until he got caught, and then he reported it. He hid from Canadians his millions of dollars in Morneau-Shapelle shares in a numbered company in Alberta, despite wrongly telling others it was in a blind trust, until he got caught, and now he's selling them. Why does he expect us to blindly trust that he is not hiding other conflicts of interest in his 8 additional numbered companies that he has across the country?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have a process in this country to ensure that ministers don't have conflicts of interest. I worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that I disclosed all my assets. I worked with her to ensure that I took an approach that freed me from conflicts. But I called her this morning and I informed her that I was going to take 2 additional steps beyond her recommendations. First, I was going to put my assets in a blind trust. And second, I was going to work with her to ensure that neither myself nor my family have any shareholdings in Morneau-Shapelle, the company that I used to be with. Finally, I'm going to continue with the conflict of interest screen to make sure that I have no conflict of interest and that Canadians have confidence.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Carleton.
For the last several months, this finance minister has said that our farmers, plumbers, and other small business owners are a privileged few using fancy accounting schemes to avoid paying their fair share. We now learn that this finance minister used a loophole, putting millions of dollars of shares he was otherwise banned from owning into a numbered company in Alberta in order to continue to earn millions of dollars. Now that this hypocrisy is exposed, doesn't he think it's time to apologize to those business owners he slandered?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, two separate issues there. So let's start with what we've actually been working with on behalf of Canadians. We're working towards...
Order. I'm going to ask the members. I'm asking the honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton, and others to try to restrain themselves and to wait until it's their turn, if it comes today, to speak, and not speak when they haven't got the floor, as they know the rules don't permit interruptions. The Honourable Minister of Finance has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, 2 issues from that question. First, we've been working with Canadians to make sure that we have a tax system that doesn't create advantages only for the very wealthy. We've also ensured that we have tax rates that are low, so small businesses can invest across the country. And with respect to my own finances, what I am going to continue to do is to work with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that I not only meet all of her recommendations, but even go further to ensure that Canadians have confidence in the long-term future of this country and confidence in the role of the Minister of Finance.
Member for Carleton.
The minister has vast powers at his hands that he would be able to use to advantage the company in which he had tens of millions of dollars of secret holdings. He committed to the Ethics Commissioner in writing that he would recuse himself from any matters that might advantage Morneau-Shapelle. Can the minister tell us how many times he recused himself from matters relating to Morneau-Shapelle since he took office?
Great question. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by setting the record straight. I disclosed all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner to meet up to the high standards of integrity that this government wants to continue to uphold. I will continue to do so. What I can say is that we will, on an ongoing basis, continue to work on behalf of Canadians. We know that what's important is that we meet up to their standards. I will ensure that to the extent that there's any approach that the Ethics Commissioner advises me to take, I take. And as I said, I'm going that one step further than any person has before me to divest of my assets in Morneau-Shapelle.
L'honorable député de Richmond-Arthabasca.
Monsieur le Président, on a appris ce matin dans le Globe and Mail que le ministre des Finances avait dit à ses collègues, ses ex-collègues, il y a 2 ans de ça, qu'il mettrait toutes ses actions dans une fiducie sans droit de regard. Il avait même confirmé à des journalistes. Et tout d'un coup, là, ils viennent de se réveiller, il y a une lumière qui vient d'allumer. Là, ils viennent de se rendre compte, 2 ans après, ce que tous les députés ici en Chambre savent, que ça prend 60 jours maximum, comme le demande la loi, où on doit déclarer nos actifs. Tout d'un coup, il y a une lumière qui vient de s'allumer. On voudrait savoir clairement quand le ministre des Finances a annoncé son conflit d'intérêts au premier ministre.
Bravo. Bravo.
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, dans notre système, on travaille avec le commissaire d'éthique pour être clair de notre situation. Ça, c'est ce que j'ai fait. J'ai fait au début avec le commissaire d'éthique et de cette façon, j'ai eu l'avis de le commissaire d'éthique et j'ai suivi les recommandations tout le temps. Mais maintenant, aujourd'hui, j'ai parlé avec le commissaire d'éthique et j'ai dit que je voudrais faire des autres choses. Une fiducie à son égard et je vais travailler avec elle pour vendre toutes mes actions à Montréal de moi et ma famille. Ça, c'est très important d'avoir la confiance des Canadiennes et Canadiens.
L'honorable député de Richmond-Arthabasca.
2 ans pour comprendre l'évidence, Monsieur le Président. La lettre de mandat que le premier ministre a donnée à son ministre des Finances stipule, et je cite, « Vous devez observer les normes les plus élevées en matière d'honnêteté et d'impartialité et l'organisation de vos affaires privées devrait pouvoir faire l'objet d'un examen scrupuleux du public. » De qui je parle, Monsieur le Président? Du ministre des Finances, rien de moins. Le même que le premier ministre a défendu pas plus tard qu'hier ici dans cette Chambre. Quand le ministre des Finances a dit au premier ministre qu'il était en conflit d'intérêts.
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't talk to the Prime Minister about this. I spoke to the Ethics Commissioner. That's actually the way our system works. I worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that I didn't have conflicts of interest. And in fact, I followed to the letter the approach that she suggested. What I'm saying today is that I don't think the distractions, the slander, the things that are being said across the hall are in any way helpful to our economy or to Canadians. So I'm going to move forward and take an additional step, a step that will ensure the confidence of Canadians and ensure that I can get back to the work that I want to do.
L'honorable député de Rimouski-Lingette, de Mississauga-les-Basses.
Monsieur le Président, le ministre des Finances, pendant 2 ans, a dit à sa propre compagnie qu'il placerait ses intérêts dans une fiducie sans droit de regard. Il a dit pendant 2 ans aux médias qu'il placerait ses intérêts dans une fiducie sans droit de regard. Il a dit pendant 2 ans qu'il placerait ses intérêts à ses propres collègues dans une fiducie sans droit de regard. Pourquoi, pendant 2 ans, a-t-il induit en erreur les médias, ses collègues, sa compagnie et en fait tous les Canadiens?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, d'être absolument clair, la façon qu'on travaille ici avec le commissaire d'Asix est de travailler avec elle, expliquer notre situation, avoir quelques avis de le commissaire d'éthique et suivre les recommandations. C'est ce que j'ai fait. Donc, avec ces recommandations, j'ai eu la certitude que je n'ai pas eu de conflits d'intérêts. Maintenant, j'ai décidé de faire encore en plus. Et ça va être une situation où on peut avoir encore plus de confiance dans la position du ministre des Finances.
Honorable député de Rimouski-Lingette, de Mississauga-les-Basses.
Il avait si confiance dans ce qu'il a fait. Pourquoi est-ce qu'il a dit le contraire de la vérité à tous ses collègues? Selon nos informations, dans les 5 jours qui ont suivi la présentation du projet de loi C-27, qui bénéficiera directement à Montréal, qui est un projet de loi parrainé par le ministre des Finances lui-même, la valeur des actions de Montréal a augmenté de 4,8 %. Ainsi, le ministre des Finances aurait fait un profit sur ses actions de plus de 2 millions de dollars. Est-ce qu'il ne trouve pas, comme personne intelligente, qu'il y a ici une apparence de conflit d'intérêts, qu'il était en position de pouvoir bénéficier de ses propres actions?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, to be clear, what I did, I ensured that I worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that she understood my situation. I took her recommendations and made sure that I moved forward with them to not have a conflict of interest. Now I've gone one step further. And in order to make sure that there is no possibility of any conflict whatsoever, I actually informed the Ethics Commissioner this morning that I would like to work with her to divest of any shares for me or my family in my former Morneau Shepell employer. That, I think, will give a great deal of confidence to all Canadians.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the few days after he personally introduced Bill C-27, a bill designed to attack the pensions of Canadians and help firms like Morneau Shepell, the value of Morneau Shepell's stocks increased by 4.8%. For the finance minister's personal holdings, that represented a profit of over $2 million in just 5 days. That's more money than the average Canadian makes in a lifetime of work. The minister constantly talks about serving the public, but how does pocketing millions of dollars from his work as the minister do anything but serve himself?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, as I said this morning to the Ethics Commissioner, I've taken all of her recommendations because I respect the office of the Ethics Commissioner, and I believe that what she's doing is trying to ensure that we don't have conflicts of interest. I also said that I'm going to move forward with additional steps to work with her and her office in whatever way I can in order to move away from having any of those shareholdings. And that will happen over the course of time. I won't have any understanding of what the actual proceeds will or won't be, and that's the process as it should be.
Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
For 2 years, the finance minister told the media that he was putting his shares in a blind trust. He told the same thing to his old company. Canadians and even fellow Liberal MPs lived this lie. And his response 2 years later, I guess, after making millions, now it's time to do the right thing. Talk about Liberal entitlement. These guys really know how to celebrate an anniversary. Too many Canadians already think that too many politicians are just in it for themselves, and now this. Does this finance minister simply not understand that his actions ruin the trust in our institutions? And if he really wants to do the right thing, will he apologize for abusing the trust they put in him?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I have a different sense of why Canadians have a distrust in politicians. When people say things that they're aware are certainly not the case, that is why Canadians don't have confidence in politicians. What the member opposite knows is that I fully disclosed my assets to the Ethics Commissioner. I worked with the Ethics Commissioner to get her recommendations, and I followed those recommendations. If the member opposite is actually suggesting that the Ethics Commissioner is not doing a good job, he should come out and say that directly.
L'honorable député de Beauce.
Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement s'est fait élire sous la rubrique de la transparence et aujourd'hui, ce qu'on a, c'est tout le contraire. Le ministre des Finances et sa compagnie Morneau Shepell a bénéficié des actions du ministre lui-même. Sa compagnie a fait de l'argent et le ministre détient encore des actions de cette compagnie-là. Il a déposé un projet de loi, le projet de loi C-27, qui a augmenté directement les profits de Morneau Shepell. Ma question est simple, Monsieur le Président. Quand le ministre des Finances a-t-il informé le premier ministre qu'ils étaient en conflit d'intérêts et quand s'est-il récusé de toute discussion par rapport à ce projet de loi-là?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, la façon d'assurer qu'on n'a pas un conflit d'intérêts au Canada, c'est de travailler avec le commissaire d'éthique. Et c'est ce que j'ai fait. J'ai expliqué ma situation, elle m'a donné quelques avis et j'ai suivi les recommandations. Et ça, c'est la façon d'être certain qu'on n'a pas un conflit d'intérêts. Je vais faire des choses en plus, avec une fiducie en son égard et avec une situation où je vais travailler avec le commissaire pour vendre les actions de moi et ma famille dans la compagnie Morneau Shepell. Ça va être certain qu'on peut avoir la confiance dans ma position.
Député de Beauce.
Monsieur le Président, ce qu'on doit regretter, c'est que ces discussions avec la commissaire à l'éthique n'étaient pas dans le but d'avoir plus de transparence, mais dans le but de trouver une façon de contourner la loi. Et c'est ce qu'il a fait, et c'est ce qu'il voulait faire depuis 2013. En 2013, le ministre a prononcé, alors qu'il était directeur de Morneau Shepell, un discours où il a parlé de la nécessité d'une loi qui permet les régimes à prestations cibles au Canada. Or, en 2016, il a livré la marchandise, il a déposé ce projet de loi-là qui a bénéficié au ministre lui-même et à sa corporation. Quand le ministre s'est-il récusé de ces discussions?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, je vais continuer dans mon situation de travailler pour les familles canadiennes, pour la classe moyenne au Canada, parce que je sais que c'est très important. Nous avons fait beaucoup de choses très importantes dans notre pays. Une réduction d'impôts pour la classe moyenne, l'introduction d'allocations canadiennes aux enfants, une amélioration de notre système de retraite pour les Canadiennes. Et nous allons continuer avec les mesures, les politiques qui vont aider les familles canadiennes. Ça, c'est quelque chose de très important pour moi. Je voudrais continuer avec le travail important et pas avec les choses qui sont vraiment pas nécessaires à parler au sujet.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader. Order.
Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the executive chair of Morneau Chappelle said, and I quote, "We need legislation enabling target benefit plans in all Canadian jurisdictions," unquote. So he made it happen. He became the Minister of Finance and he tabled the legislation himself. To make this conflict much worse, Morneau Chappelle continued to pay that minister tens of thousands of dollars a month. The question the minister has not answered is why did he not recuse himself around discussions about Bill C-27?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the process for working with the Ethics Commissioner, which all 338 members in this House are familiar with, is actually presenting your assets, working with the Ethics Commissioner to understand her advice, and taking that advice, respecting the officers of Parliament. And what I did was I took the advice, I respected the officer of Parliament, and I moved forward with the conflicts of interest screen, which I know has been put in place for the last year and a half. So that is the way that we do it in this country, and I've decided to take one step further because I think that that's worth doing in my position as Minister of Finance. So I'm looking forward to continuing to do that.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Morneau Chappelle thought that the Minister of Finance had placed his shares in a blind trust. We all thought he had placed his shares in a blind trust. He had not done that, and in fact, he was enacting legislation that would directly benefit him and Morneau Chappelle. I have a different question. Maybe the minister will answer this. At any time did the minister discuss Bill C-27 with Morneau Chappelle while he was finance minister? At any time did they discuss this bill?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
No.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Time and time again, the minister has claimed that he's been in full compliance with the ethics law, but now we find out that by his own admission today that he's not been. Well, here's another one, Mr. Speaker. Last week we learned that the minister has been hiding his ownership of an offshore corporation for over 2 years, something he is obliged by law to disclose. How can any Canadian believe anything that this minister says when he keeps saying that he's been following the law, and we now know that that isn't true?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I know the members opposite are familiar with the approach to declaring assets to the Ethics Commissioner, to getting the advice of the Ethics Commissioner, and to moving forward. And that's exactly the approach that I've taken. So
Order. I would ask the Honourable Member for Calgary Midnapore and others. I know she's new here, but I think she knows the rules by now that one is not to interrupt, and we're to wait. I would encourage members to wait and to wait and save their comments until they have the floor. The Honourable Minister of Finance has the floor. Order.
So my situation has been fully disclosed, and what I've now said this morning is that I'm actually going to go a step further, and that step further is, in my estimation, something that is necessary because of the distraction that this places at our feet at this moment. So putting in place a blind trust, making sure that I no longer, or my family no longer has shares in Morneau Chappelle, I think will help with the confidence allowing us to do our job.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Minister keeps saying that we have a process. Well, yes, Minister, we do. It's called honesty and integrity. For 2 years, the minister was breaking the law by specifically hiding the ownership of his offshore corporation from the Ethics Commissioner. That's not called compliance. That's not called working with the Ethics Commissioner. It's called hiding from the Ethics Commissioner. When will the minister finally admit that he broke the law.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, to address the question directly, I disclosed all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner at the time of discussing that with him. We did, in fact, find out later that there was one administrative error which was not substantive. So we've corrected that problem. What I will do on an ongoing basis is work with the annual process to make sure that we disclose everything to the Ethics Commissioner, which will help Canadians to have confidence. And what I know now is that I will ensure that I live by those very high standards, because that will allow me to get on with the work that we want to do to improve the lives of Canadians.
Monsieur le Président, le ministre des Finances joue au caméléon. Mais quand nous avons devant nous tous les éléments d'un conflit d'intérêts, on appelle ça un conflit d'intérêts. Le ministre des Finances est responsable de la convention fiscale entre le Canada et la Barbade. La Barbade est reconnue comme un paradis fiscal. Morneau-Chapelle possède une filiale, devinez où? À la Barbade. Monsieur le Président, le ministre des Finances s'est-il récusé des discussions sur cette convention fiscale?
Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, while the opposition is focused on me and my personal finance, I'll tell you what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on continuing to work for Canadians. The work we've done over the last couple of years is not finished, but it's a really, really great start. We've got a situation where our economy is growing at a pace that wasn't seen during the years of the previous government. We've seen more growth in employment over the last year than we've seen in a decade. So Canadians are feeling better. Middle-class Canadians have the possibility of getting a job. We know there's more work to be done, and we're going to focus on it.
L'honorable député de Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix.
C'est triste de voir que quelqu'un comme le ministre des Finances se croit au-dessus de tout. Le ministre des Finances est responsable de la convention fiscale entre le Canada et la Barbade. On vient d'apprendre qu'il a enfin trouvé le gros bon sens grâce à nos pressions constantes. Il s'est enfin aperçu que les taux se resserraient autour de lui et qu'il était en conflit d'intérêts. Avant de mettre ses avoirs en fiducie, a-t-il pris la peine de se récuser de toute discussion du cabinet en lien avec la convention fiscale avec la Barbade?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, comme j'ai dit, c'est très important d'avoir un système pour les conflits d'intérêts dans notre pays. Et j'ai suivi les recommandations de la commissaire d'éthique. Et c'était très important de suivre les recommandations, de respecter les gens dans le Parlement. Et ça c'était l'approche importante. Je vais continuer à le faire. Et pour moi, d'avoir la certitude que je n'ai pas un conflit, j'ai décidé de faire encore plus. J'ai décidé de faire des choses comme vendre mes actions, les actions de ma famille, des choses comme une fiducie sans égard pour être certain que je n'ai pas et je ne peux pas avoir des conflits d'intérêts.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that makes it clear the minister hid his money and now he's still hiding from Canadians.
Yeah.
And the Prime Minister directed the Finance Minister to, quote, uphold the highest standards of honesty and impartiality, an obligation that is not fully discharged, the PM said, by simply acting within the law. The Finance Minister directly benefits from the tax treaty with Barbados. He oversees negotiations that set the tax rules between these two countries. That's not impartial. He didn't tell anyone. That's not honest. So I ask again, did the Finance Minister recuse himself from all discussions about the Canada-Barbados tax treaty?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address the core of that question. The Prime Minister sets the highest standards for integrity of our government. He expects us to follow through on the commitments that we have to make to ensure we don't have conflicts of interest. When we look at conflicts of interest, the way we work towards ensuring we don't have them in our system is working with the Ethics Commissioner. So that's why I did that. That's why I followed her recommendations. I know that in order to do even more, I'm going to take additional steps. What I can make absolutely clear to Canadians is our government remains committed to the highest standards of integrity. We're going to go above and beyond the recommendations to make.
Well, Mr. Speaker, today the Finance Minister admitted that his ethical standards are in tatters. Ministers are not supposed to directly own shares in companies, especially those they regulate. So to get around that, the minister hid his mega-million-dollar fortune in an Alberta-numbered company, dodging ethical guidelines and paying less tax than other law-abiding Canadians. Only a wealthy and entitled finance minister could pull off such a stunt. With his integrity in shambles, will the minister now admit that he's still in a conflict of interest?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there are numerous inaccuracies in that question. Let's start with the very first fact that I disclosed all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner. That was very important. Let's move forward to say that I actually took the recommendation.
Order. Perhaps members didn't hear what I said earlier about losing a question, because that could happen very soon. Honourable Minister of Finance has the floor.
The second step, of course, was taking the recommendations from the Ethics Commissioner so that I could make sure that I was free of conflicts of interest. This is about respecting the officers of Parliament. Now, it's not a surprise to me that the members opposite who didn't respect Statistics Canada, who didn't respect science, also don't necessarily respect an officer of Parliament. I'm going to continue to do so and live up to the highest standards that Canadians expect of me.
The Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister conveniently forgot the company with the French villa that he forgot to disclose. Last week, I was in Maple Ridge and heard the outrage residents have towards their missing in action MP over his government's hypocrisy on taxes. Small businesses are angry that the finance minister, who is asking them to pay more taxes, receives tens of thousands of dollars per month from a company that he owns and regulates, and that is registered in an offshore tax haven. Why did it take him 2 years to admit that he failed to uphold the ethical standards expected of a finance minister?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the statement was entirely factually incorrect. But let me move forward and say what we've done for Canadians this week. For small businesses across the country, we are moving forward to lower their tax rate. By January 1st, 2019, they will have a 9% tax rate, which is lower than the 10.5% presently. What we're also doing is making sure their system is fair. Businesses will be able to continue to save within their company so that they can actually invest in their business or have a retirement, but we will do that in a way that doesn't advantage the very few that are already successful. So these are important measures that we're going to move forward to help.
The Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
For 2 years, the finance minister used fancy lawyers and fancy accounting schemes to secretly exploit an ethics loophole and maintain control of millions of dollars of Morneau Shepell shares that as finance minister he was banned from owning directly. Changing that scheme 2 years too late and only after his hand was caught in the cookie jar doesn't change the fact that this was corrupt and a conflict of interest. Right. Why did the finance minister work so much harder to hide his conflict of interest than to actually avoid it in the first place?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, based on this question, I can only assume that the member opposite is questioning the advice of the Ethics Commissioner. What I did by exposing all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner is I allowed her to give me advice on how best to move forward to ensure that I didn't have a conflict of interest. And I took those recommendations, respecting the office and making sure that I assured Canadians that I didn't have a conflict of interest. By taking the additional step, moving forward to do things not required of me, I want to make sure that we can continue to do the work that we want to do for Canadians, to make sure that Canadian families are having success and that we're doing better and better over the years to come.
The Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, we're questioning this minister's clear conflict of interest. Exactly. Morneau Shepell is a company that administers pensions. It's a company that would benefit from friendly legislation from this finance minister, and that's exactly what happened. The minister introduced a bill to allow target benefit pension plans, the very plans his own company administers. The finance minister personally profited from the decisions that he made as the Minister of Finance. Why did it take 2 years for the minister to realize that he shouldn't be both the Minister of Finance and the Minister for Morneau Shepell?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we are going to move on from this discussion around our personal finances. We're going to ensure that we do the work that Canadians want us to do. We know that dealing with conflicts of interest. That's important. We've done that. I've taken an additional step. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work to ensure that the growth that we've seen in our economy continues, that the jobs that we've grown in our economy help families, and that we can continue to add more new jobs. That's the work that we're committed to doing for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the facts are clear. The finance minister's letter was specific. In 2015, he told all the owners of his company, Morneau Chappelle, and Canadians that he would put his assets into a blind trust. He clearly knew what the right thing to do was, but instead he chose to use a loophole and continue to deliberately hide and control millions of dollars. Another important question is, what Canadians need to know, when did the Prime Minister, was he complicit or deceived? When did he know?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, to be absolutely clear, disclosing all my assets was very important, and that's exactly what I did with the Ethics Commissioner. That's the way the system works. I did that because the Prime Minister asked myself and all of the members of our government to live up to the highest standards of integrity. Working with the Ethics Commissioner and taking her recommendations is really respecting the role of that officer of Parliament. We will continue to respect the role of Parliament and take her recommendations as opposed to the ill-informed recommendations across the hall.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just going to remind the Finance Minister I will not be shamed by his personal lack of respect for this Parliament, so thank you. I'm just going to remind him that his job was to uphold the highest standards of honesty and partiality, that he should arrange his personal private affairs with the conflict of interest rules, and it was just not beyond the letter. It was the letter of the law that may be there, but his job was to go over and above. So I'm asking now, can the Finance Minister confirm, was he hiding this from the Prime Minister as well? Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've been very clear to say that the Prime Minister expects us to live up to the highest standards of integrity, and that's what we've done here. He expects us to work with the Ethics Commissioner. He expects us to take the recommendations of the Ethics Commissioner and put them into place. In my situation, the Ethics Commissioner gave me some very specific ideas on how I could best ensure that I didn't have conflict of interest. I followed those recommendations. Now I'm going to take some additional steps to go even further. That, Mr. Speaker, I think will assure all Canadians of confidence in this role.
The Honourable Member for Provencher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are the facts. The Prime Minister clearly instructed the Finance Minister to arrange his private affairs in a way that would bear the closest public scrutiny. The Finance Minister told Morneau Chappelle and the press that he would place his holdings in a blind trust to avoid conflicts of interest. But 2 years later, we now know that he did no such thing. What? I'll give the Minister another opportunity to answer the question. When did he tell the Prime Minister that he chose not to put his assets in a blind trust, despite committing to do that?
Good question. Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to actually go to the real facts as opposed to the alternative facts and give a little explanation to the member opposite. So the real facts are that I gave all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner so that she could determine the best way to avoid conflicts of interest. She told me that the best measure of compliance was to put in place a conflict of interest screen, which is exactly what I did. So complying with the Ethics Commissioner, respecting an officer of Parliament, that's the way we'll continue to comport ourselves. And in fact, I'm going to go some steps further than that.
So, Mr. Speaker, the minister least capable of relating to the hard-scrabble realities of middle-class small business, the Liberals' chief tax loophole closer, is finally closing a loophole through which he moved his great wealth in clear violation of the spirit of ethical guidelines and the law. But there's still the minister's unreported private corporation in France. Mr. Speaker, can the Finance Minister tell us whether he's been served notice by the Ethics Commissioner of his violation of the Conflict of Interest Act?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I've reported to this House, I disclosed all of my assets to the Ethics Commissioner, and as I found out recently, we did have an administrative oversight around the approach that I took to actually purchase a house. So we've corrected that oversight, and I've worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that that is clear.